awesome. They're usually asleep. Usually babies are asleep during this, and she's just, she was squeezing my finger. Amen, amen. In 2017, I listened to God. It wasn't the only time, I hope, but it was especially apparent to me that for some reason God was speaking to me then, and for some reason I actually listened. I'm not always good at listening to God. But I do remember at that time that I was feeling very strongly that this church, and hearing feedback that we needed to do some short-term missions. Short-term missions had not really been a part of the history of the church here at Reedland, and they have a profound power of not only affecting people, but also shaping people. And so we wanted to be involved in some type of short-term mission work, but I had been to places in Central America, and for a long time, those had been really good places to do mission work, but during the mid-2010s, several of those places went through some governmental disruptions, and they were a little more difficult to go to. Plus, they became a lot more expensive to travel to. Now, some of that is reversed now, and there's actually some great places to go, which is why we're looking back at going into Honduras. But at the time, it was a little difficult. And I remember for some reason, I don't understand why, but I started to think about Puerto Rico. And I didn't know anything about Puerto Rico. In 2017, if you'd asked me to find Puerto Rico on a map, I don't think I could have done it. All I knew is that it was a territory of the U.S., and so therefore, they would have the same money. They would have the same language, at least a little bit, right? It's mostly Spanish there, but you can speak in English and do things and do business that way. That they would, you wouldn't have to have a passport to go there, that your health insurance would cover you if something happened there because it's part of the U.S. But I really didn't know anything about it. But I felt like God was really prompting me for quite a while to go explore the possibilities of a trip down there. So that spring, Alicia and I scheduled a trip to go down to Puerto Rico for a week, explore the island, and meet some missionary contacts that I had researched there, and see if it would be possible to do a trip down to Puerto Rico. Now, as most of you guys know, we ended up meeting the wonderful people at the Arecibo Church of Christ there, and they were so excited about the possibility. They said they could house us, feed us. We worked out all the details. They said, we want you to come back, and we want you to do a trip down here. That was in May of 2017. If you remember, in September of 2017, Hurricane Maria came through the Bahamas and swept across the island of Puerto Rico, killing nearly 3,000 people and doing $91 billion worth of damage. That's the fourth costliest hurricane ever. Within weeks, the church at Arecibo was contacting us saying, how soon can you come? There's just devastation. We have so many members, so many people in the community who don't have roofs, who don't have electricity, who don't have anything. How soon can you come? So the following July, we were there, a big group of us, repairing homes, painting, and doing much, much more, resulting in at least one woman that we know of, Miss Sandra, coming to Christ directly because of our interaction with him. And she's still a member of the church there today. So God knew that I needed to go to Puerto Rico in the spring of 2017 to make those contacts and connections, because there was a hurricane coming in the fall of 2017, and we would be able to go in the summer of 2018, and there would be work that needed to be done, and more importantly, there would be people that needed to be touched by the gospel of Jesus Christ. So he sent us there in advance of the trouble to create an opportunity to be a light after the hurricane. I listened to God, and that time, somehow, I got it right. But here's what I really find interesting about that. We've been talking about how John 1 tells us that Jesus is the light of the world, a light that shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. Now, I need to actually illustrate this morning, and I'm going to need a couple volunteers. I didn't pre-select anybody, so I need 2 volunteers who are just, and not all at once. I can only have 2. So just 2 people who will volunteer. Juliana, you're going to come help me? All right. And Laura, you're going to come help me. Okay. All right. Juliana, you going to come help me? Your daddy can come with you. It's okay. Okay, there we go. All right. Josh, Juliana, you got to stand on that side stage. Laura, you come here. All right. Laura, you get the flashlight. Okay? I'm just going to set this down here for now. All right. Now, we're going to just say for a moment that Laura is the all-powerful, almighty, Omniscient God of the universe. Okay? Are you prepared to play that role? Yeah, okay, she'll do her best, right? Yeah. By the way, come back tonight for the Laura Baldwin experience as part of karaoke. So she's going to play the role of God, and this light in her hand is going to be Jesus, more or less, the light of the world, right? The Word of God being sent forth, the light being sent forth. Now, Juliana is a person. She's just a created human being. She's just Juliana, right? She is a human being, just a totally normal person, just living in this world. So, when God turns on the flashlight, okay, the Word goes forth. The Word goes forth from God, all right, and shines it into the darkness and hits Juliana with the light. What happens to Juliana? She's illuminated, right? So, in a physical sense, what's actually happening is there's electromagnetic radiation in packets of energy that we call photons zooming through the space in between them at about 299,792,458 meters per second. In other words, that's fast enough for light to go from the sun to the earth in 8 minutes and 10 seconds. Now, I would just say in about 8 minutes, but at that speed, the 10 seconds really matters. Do you know how far light travels in 10 seconds? 9 billion feet. So if you just say 8 minutes, you really got it wrong. So in 8 minutes and 10 seconds, light can travel from the sun to the earth. So that light is traveling that fast across this distance, and these photons, these packets of electromagnetic radiation, are hitting Juliana. Now, when they hit Juliana, there's a couple things that can happen. One, the light could be transmitted. If she was a lens, it could be focused and transmitted. That's not going on here. So there's two other things that can happen. These photons can either be reflected, so shines the light, and we can see that she's illuminated, right? That light is bouncing off of her, hitting us in the eyes, and that's what we call light, that's what we call illumination. Or, some of those photons are being absorbed into her body, and that energy is actually being turned into heat. Now, with a flashlight, we don't generally feel that. But you know, if you have a big warming light or the sun, you can feel some of that photonic energy being transferred into motion, which we feel as heat, which warms us. And so these are the things that are happening. She's being illuminated and warmed, not by any power of her own, but just by being bombarded with quadrillions of photons every second. Now, by a show of hands, how many of you came here for a physics lesson this morning? Well, you got one, okay? All right. Now, there's more. Unlike sound, which needs a medium to transmit through. It actually has to transmit through some type of matter. Light can travel in a vacuum. So light can travel through actual nothingness. And so space itself is actually nothing. So when the sun is sending light to Earth, it's actually traveling through a vacuum. It's actually traveling through the lack of anything, the lack of matter. And the photons can actually pass right through that vacuum, right through that nothingness. The total darkness actually continues to exist while the light passes through it, because darkness actually isn't a thing, it's just the absence of light. So we're going to actually turn out the lights again like we did a few weeks ago with my handy dandy app here. Or Ryan might beat me to it. I don't know, we'll see. Is he racing back there? All right, here we go. All right, now, point it so it's not hitting the ground, Laura. Point it right at her so it's not hitting the ground. Okay, now what you see here is the light is actually passing through the darkness and hitting her. And in between, you can't tell that there's light, because the light travels through the darkness and it doesn't have anything to hit to illuminate. Now, I've got a spray bottle here. If I spray, what do you see? Suddenly you see the light because it's hitting matter. But in the absence of matter, the light travels through the darkness. It leaves the flashlight and it hits the subject and it reflects off the subject. But in the middle, there's nothing. This darkness can't understand what's going on, right? So when God turns on the light of Christ and shines it through the darkness, and it illuminates its human subject and warms them, it has to actually travel through the darkness to get there, and the darkness doesn't even know that it's happening. All right, let's thank our volunteers. They can go ahead and go back to their seats. You can just set the flashlight on the table there, it would be fine. So I just wanted you to think about this for a minute. When I went to Puerto Rico, starting in 2015 and 2016, God turned on the light. He started shining that light. He started sending that message that he knew there was going to be darkness. There was going to be this hurricane, this devastation, this terrible thing that was going to happen. And he knew that there was going to need to be the light of Christ. There was going to need to be illumination after that fact. So in 2018, let me reverse this so it looks right to you. Here's God sending that light. Over here, 2018, we're going to need it. 2015, God starts sending the message, hey, Brian, start thinking about Puerto Rico. Hey, Brian. And I bet you he did that with countless other people, too. Hey, start thinking about Puerto Rico. 2017, hurricane. 2018, the light hits and there's illumination. This is the way that God works. No one in 2017 could see the light already passing through. And humans, what we think is, there's a disaster, now we need to call for help. We can't see the fact that God has already been working ahead of time and that light is already passing through the darkness. Let's look closer at the passage from John 1 that talks about the relationship between the light and the dark as it passes through it. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind, the light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome / understood it. Now, if you're reading along in your Bible, it's going to have one of those two words. Your translation might have that the darkness has not understood it. Or your translation might have that the darkness has not overcome it. Both are appropriate translations, neither give the full picture of the word. So I put both meanings here on the screen so that we can try and understand them together. The Greek word in question here is a conjunctive word. It's a combination of two words. It's kata lambano. You want to say that with me? It's really fun to say. Kata lambano. And that word, if taken literally, you take the two parts apart and you take them literally, one of the ways that you could literally translate that would be to like aggressively seize. Or maybe in modern English, a very literal translation would be to take down. So if you think about a football player and they're trying to tackle another football player, what do we call that? We call that a takedown, right? Or an MMA fighter who takes down their opponent, right? And so we have this understanding of this idea of a takedown. And that actually is a really good way to understand some of the meaning of this word. It's violent, it's seizing, it's grasping, it's overcoming, it's overtaking. One of the ways that we translate the Bible, the people who do this, who have a lot more expertise than I do by a country mile, the people that translate this have multiple degrees in this. One of the things they do is they go and they look at these words and they say, how are these words being used in contemporary literature? So this word outside of the Bible, other places in the Bible, but then outside of the Bible, what was the meaning that was being associated with it? Well, in the works of Homer, this word is used by Homer in this way. Homer uses the word katalambano to talk about a violent or aggressive tackle or attack, a physical attack, a seizing, a taking down, an overcoming. But there's also a symbolic meaning, and that meaning is tied to the physical word grasping. We would say grasping as a physical word, but we also use that as a mental word, right? Do you grasp the concept? I have a good grasp on it. So now you can see the crossover. So there's symbolic meaning too, where we get the idea of understanding. Can you grasp it? Can you understand it? Can you comprehend it? It refers to making sense of something. So Plato, another contemporary writer to the Bible, Plato uses this word that way. So here in ancient Greek, you've got Homer who's using it in the physical sense of taking down, taking control, seizing, making it their own. And then you have Plato who's using the word to talk about grasping, understanding, comprehending. And so when we come to the Bible now, we got some translators who are going to lean the way of Homer, and they're going to say, well, I got to choose a word so the darkness has not overcome it. And you have other people who are going to lean the way of Plato, and they're going to say, well, the darkness has not understood it, and they're both right. Because both meanings have to do what John is trying to say here. So the Bible uses this word in both different ways. In Mark 9:18, there's a demonic spirit who seizes a boy, katalambano, and throws him into convulsions. There's our physical version. In John 8, the woman caught in adultery was caught in the act. She was katalambano. In Acts 4:13, the Sanhedrin recognized or understood, katalambano, that Peter and John were uneducated men, and yet they spoke with authority after being with Jesus. In Ephesians 3:18, Paul prays that all believers will comprehend, katalambano, the length and height and breadth of God's love. So the idea here is that both meanings apply. And so the darkness, as the light is passing through it, can't understand it. It doesn't even know. Just in the same way that if you've got the sun and you've got the earth and you're in the middle of space and you're looking this way across the beam, you don't even know it's there. You could look that way and you could see the sun. You could look that way and you could see the earth being illuminated. So you can see the source and you can see the subject. But if you're looking through space, you wouldn't have any idea. There's no light. You're in darkness. You would have no idea that light, that photons, that photonic energy, that electromagnetic radiation is zipping by you, quadrillions of photons all around you, passing you left and right, and you'd have no idea. Because the darkness cannot understand, comprehend the light. But in the same way, if you're in space and you've got the sun and you've got the earth, you can't stop it. There's nothing you can do to overtake it, to take it down, to say, I'm not going to let the sun get to the earth. You can't do it. In fact, the light of the sun is so powerful that even if you put your body between, even if you were humongous and you could put your body between the sun and the earth, the photons can actually pass around and through you and get on through you. You're not thick enough. You're not dense enough to stop that energy. You cannot. The darkness is actually nothing. You're something. The darkness is nothing. The darkness is a vacuum. There's nothing it can do to overtake, to stop the transmission of the light that's passing through it. This is incredibly important theologically to what's happening in this passage and in our own lives. Think about this in terms of the work of God. All the way back at the beginning of time. In the garden, even before the Garden of Eden, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word was with God in the beginning. All the way back at the beginning of time, God turned on the light. He sent forth the Word. Were you even born yet? Did God know when He turned on the light that one day in 2025, you were going to look at your husband, wife, child, or parent and call them some terrible name and be mean and nasty and need forgiveness from them and Him? Did God know all the way back at the beginning when He turned on the light that someday in 2025 you were going to kind of tell a half-truth that was really more of a lie? That you were going to be jealous and bitter and angry and unforgiving and lustful. And yes, He knew that. And He knew that you were going to need the light of Christ to shine upon you, to illuminate you and warm you. And He sent the light through the darkness, before the darkness, to arrive at you. God knew before the beginning of time that Cain would kill Abel. God knew before the beginning of time that Noah's generation would be awful, that Sodom and Gomorrah would happen. And all the time that those things were going on, even in the days of Noah when the world was so bad that God regretted making it, the light was already passing through the darkness. And the world, the darkness around, had no idea. But then it would hit matter, which would cause it to reflect and absorb. Noah absorbs God's light and reflects it to the world, being set apart from the world around him. His cold heart is warmed by the light of God, and he doesn't become like the people around him. He becomes a child of God, reflecting God's light back to the world. Abraham absorbs God's light and is warmed by it, and he leaves his home by faith and is illuminated for generations to see. Joseph is illuminated by God's light, and he saves Egypt and Israel from famine, and on and on and on. Even as the whole world around these people seems to be descending into darkness, the light is still there, it's still passing through, and it is still bombarding the faithful with hundreds of quintillions of photons every second. And there's a little bit more in this passage. Let's look at verses 9 through 14. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to those who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, nor of a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. An interesting thing about light. Light actually is not vision. Isn't that weird? Light is not vision. Vision is a phenomenon that God created light to be part of. So vision happens when light hits the eye, and your eye is lined with two types of receptors, rods and cones, and they have different purposes. In the darkness, your eye relies heavily on the rods. Now, rods are really, they only give you the ability to see motion and shape. So essentially, in the dark, you are one of the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park. You remember the famous line, they can only see you when you move, right? And so they always are frozen still, and inevitably, one of them moves. And you're like, why did you do that, right? But in the dark, your eyes can really only see motion and shape. How many of you remember the kind of the classic thing when you were a child, maybe you are a child now, but when you were a child and you were laying in bed and maybe there was a chair in the corner with a coat over it and the window was open and the coat was kind of moving in the wind and you thought it was a monster that was going to kill you, right? And you screamed and your parents came in, and when they turned on the light, what did you find out? Oh, it's just a coat or a pile of clothes in the corner, right? This is just the classic example, maybe some version of it. Maybe it was in the closet, maybe the door. But your eyes in the dark could really only see shape and motion. But when the light comes on, then your eye is able to use the cones. And the cones add detail, color, and contrast. So it's only in the light that you can actually see things for what they really are. So think about that from a spiritual reality. Remember that God designed all this, right? God created all this. So when he's creating these metaphors in the Bible, like, they're pretty good because he actually understands how this stuff works. Thousands of years before we knew about rods and cones and photons, God's like, yeah, I kind of understand how this works. So if you live in the darkness spiritually, you can't understand the light. Your vision is muted. You really don't realize what's happening in the space around you. You just see motion or shape, shadows or flickers. And to you, these are foreign things. These are things that look like a threat. They're terrifying. But when you come into the light, when the light of Christ illuminates you and warms your heart and you realize it's not a threat, suddenly you see all the color, detail, and contrast of God. And you don't see it as a threat anymore. Instead, you see it as the beauty of God and as the glory of God. And that's what the passage said. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We, those who are children of God, those who have been illuminated by the light, those whose hearts have been warmed and are not cold anymore, those of us who are now walking in the light. We're not cowering in the darkness, scared of shadows and shifting shapes, but we're walking in the light. For those of us that are walking in the light, we now have seen his glory. The glory of the one and only Son who comes from the Father, full of grace and truth. Really, really interesting. If you want to study this further, go into the Old Testament. Look up every time that an angel appears. When an angel appears in the Old Testament, the common response is, I'm going to die. Right? That's the common response. They're terrifying. These angels are terrifying. In fact, the descriptions are like smoke and wheels and beasts and feathers and heads and even the ones that come in the appearance of a man. It's terrifying because we are human and we are sinful and we're seeing a small snippet of the light, a little bit of the glory, and it's terrifying. It's kind of like you're in a tunnel and the light's coming at you and you just think it's got to be a train. But when we're in the light, when we're walking in the light, we have now the example of the apostles who walked with God in the flesh. Jesus himself for 3 years, and rather than being terrified, their hearts were at peace. Now, there were a few moments that were scary, right? Jesus calms a storm and they go, whoa, who is this guy? And Jesus says, peace. He's walking on the waves and he says, don't be afraid. He's transfigured on the mountain, peace. The light of God seems like a train. It seems terrifying until we realize that this is the light of God and that God brings peace. And now we have color and detail and contrast. And what does it tell us in John 1? Because now we have seen his glory. The disciples, they walked with Jesus and they saw his glory. As children of God, we now see that what we were so afraid of in the dark is not a train at the end of the tunnel. It's the light at the end of the tunnel, illuminating all the detail, giving us a passageway to freedom, and it's the glory of God. Back in 2017, when Alicia and I went to Puerto Rico, we heard about this really, really cool nighttime kayaking tour of a brackish ocean bay called Laguna Grande. It's one of, I believe, 3 places in the world that has year-round bioluminescence, and it is the second brightest bioluminescent bay in the world. So we paddled down a long inlet that was like a tunnel of mangrove trees. They just kind of grew over the top of this. And when we got into the bay, of course, it's the middle of the night, it's very dark, but because there was a little bit of moonlight and you want it to be as dark as possible, we pulled out tarps and we put tarps over the kayaks to make it as dark as possible. And then we were instructed by the tour guide on the count of 3 to smack our paddles into the water. And when we did, the most amazing thing I've ever seen happened. And I literally gasped because as our paddles hit the water, the entire water around the kayaks just lit up with sparkling blue light. It was absolutely amazing. And once you saw it, then you could see everywhere that the kayak rippled and moved through the water, there's just ripples of blue light. Every time your paddle touched the water, you could dip your hand in the water and blue light would just drip off of your hand. This is called bioluminescence. It happens because for reasons that scientists don't fully understand, millions and millions of tiny microorganisms emit light like a firefly from their body when they are disturbed. And I got to tell you, I have seen some really, really cool things in my life, but this is one of the coolest. It really was. It was pretty amazing to be in near total darkness and suddenly see this incredible light appear where you didn't expect it. Now, I suppose that the joy that I felt at that moment, seeing that light appear in the darkness, is just a little bit similar to the joy that God feels when he sees his creation, his people suddenly light up in the darkness. Imagine God, before the beginning of time, turning on that light, sending it forth, and here it is traveling through all this time, through the days of Noah, through the days of Joseph, through the dark, dark day when Jesus was crucified, through the genocide of people, the wars, the Holocaust, through all these things, these darkest moments in human history. And yet in every generation, God looks down. And just like this dark canvas, all of a sudden lights start appearing. As that light that he sent forth starts hitting human hearts and hitting human souls, warming them and illuminating. Isn't it the most amazing thing in the world? When you've known somebody for years and suddenly you run into them and they're like, I got to tell you something. I became a Christian. When I was in high school, there was a guy that I knew. He was a really nice guy, really cool guy, but he was just a partier. He was just living for Saturday night, you know. And I remember trying to talk to him about Jesus a couple times. I knew he had grown up in church, and he just wasn't having it. He didn't care. He just wasn't upset about it. He just wasn't interested. Well, about a year after I graduated from high school, there was a funeral I attended. Somebody I went to high school with. And I was at the funeral, and there were 300 or 400 people in this parlor of this really huge funeral home. Everybody just packed in. Everybody we went to high school with. And I see my friend Nate across the room, and he is making a beeline. He's pushing me out of the way. He's making a beeline to me. And he gets to me, and he literally grabs me out of the collar. And he says, I got to tell you something. And it was so noisy, we had to go outside. I really couldn't hear him. He said, we got to go talk. We got to talk. And went outside, and he goes, I know him. And I'm like, who? He's like, Jesus. And I'm like, what? And he's like, I know him. Now, my friend Nate had actually almost died. His heart had stopped. And it had been resuscitated in the hospital. And when his heart stopped, the vision of Jesus across the river. And he woke up from that surgery and he said, I am not going to live for myself anymore. And he became a Christian. And he was telling me this story about how God had changed everything in his life, and everything in his life was about Jesus now. And it was the most amazing thing to see this guy who had been living in darkness, literally living in darkness the last time I saw him. And now he's so excited. I mean, the fire behind his eyes, just the unbelievable passion in his life, that he is on fire for Jesus Christ. And I just can't imagine how much joy it brings God. The Bible tells us that there's more rejoicing in heaven over that than anything else. But when he's just surveying the earth, when his eyes are surveying the earth, and all of a sudden somebody like my friend Nate goes, bing, and lights up. Or when he's looking at communist China, where there's everything in the world happening to suppress Christian faith, and he's saying, bing, 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 because that's the fastest growing church in the world right now. Or when he's looking at Somalia or some of these places where there's Islam oppression, where people are being persecuted, and he's seeing lights that are being turned on for Jesus. Or he looks at America, where the cultural oppression against Christianity is trying, Satan is trying as hard as he can to pretend like God doesn't exist, to convince everybody that this is not a thing, that Jesus didn't raise from the dead. And still he's saying, bing, 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 lights come on. Because God turned the light on before the creation of the world, and it's been shining through the darkness this whole time. And if there's anything that's got to make Satan mad, more mad than anything else, it's got to be the fact that this whole time the light has been zipping past him through the darkness, and he can't understand it, and he can't stop it. And so Jesus being the light of the world is so much bigger than us holding up a candle and singing that we're not going to let Satan poof it out. Satan can't poof it out. He can't even understand why it stays lit. God turned on the light of the world in the beginning, and it's been moving through all of time and space and all of creation, and the darkness has not overtaken it, has not understood it, and it never will. The light collides with human hearts and lives that are illuminated, and their eyes are opened as the children of God to truly see the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Next week, the first couple rows, the first row is going to still be the teenagers, but the next 3 rows after that are going to be reserved. They've asked for us to reserve them for our friends from Lifeline Ministry. These are people, and some of you remember, we talked about this a few weeks ago. These are people who have been caught in the throes of drug addiction, and they have decided to do something about it. Kenny Vassar, who grew up at this church, is involved with them, and he's scheduling them, and he is so excited to bring his guys, his fellas, to the church where he grew up that shaped him. One of the things I love about Lifeline is as they're in Lifeline, so many of those guys embrace Jesus as their Lord and Savior. And if God's looking down at Paducah, he's seeing that little campus out there, which, by the way, is that camp we went to several years ago in Cunningham. That's where they are now. He's looking at that campus, and every day he's seeing lights come on for Jesus. And we're going to see right in these 3 rows next week a bunch of guys who are lights are coming on for Jesus. We have the opportunity every day, to continue to reflect that illumination in our lives to others. We have the opportunity every day to help that light connect with people and illuminate their hearts. But if you are sitting here listening this morning and you're saying, but I've never done that myself. I've never made that commitment. I've never decided that Jesus is going to be my Lord and Savior. Don't wait any longer. There are angels in heaven that are standing by with confetti poppers, ready to pull them, ready to celebrate, right? Make that decision. Light up your life and see the glory of God. Let's stand and let's sing.